Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that Richard Henry Lee, an often overlooked founding father, helped set the new nation on its path to freedom? Learn how Lee first suggested that America should become independent from Great Britain when he introduced the Lee Resolution that declared colonies should be free and independent states. Discover how Lee's resolution sparked events that led to the adoption of the Declaration of Independence and the birth of the United States of America. So, the ultimate American birthday party is actually celebrated on the completely wrong day.
Yeah, and for the wrong document, too.
Right, and I mean, the man who actually orchestrated the whole thing is almost entirely forgotten.
It is the ultimate historical irony, really. The mythology we've built around the birth of the United States has essentially just paved over the actual mechanics of how it happened.
It totally has. Welcome to today's deep dive. So, picture the scene we all know, right? You are sitting in a folding chair on the grass, you're like balancing a paper plate on your lap, watching fireworks light up the night sky.
Oh yeah, the smell of barbecue is just everywhere.
Exactly. It's the 4th of July, and we think we know the story. We know the date, we know the declaration, and we know the famous names.
But we are going to tear that mythology down today.
Yes, we are. We are exploring the Lee Resolution and the architecture of American liberty. So our mission today is to uncover the true timeline of independence and, shine a massive spotlight on a Virginia delegate who set the entire monumental process into motion.
It's a great mission.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to leave the fireworks behind and step into the actual boardroom of the Second Continental Congress.
What's fascinating here is the sheer tension of that room. Because if we want to find the real origin point of our independence, we have to rewind to June 7, 1776.
So almost a full month before the 4th of July.
Right. And Philadelphia in summer is just sweltering. The delegates are locked in the Pennsylvania State House.
With the windows closed, right?
And the windows are often closed to prevent eavesdropping.
Yeah.
Because, everything they're discussing borders on high treason.
Wow. Just sitting in a literal pressure cooker.
Exactly. And into this pressure cooker steps Richard Henry Lee, a delegate from Virginia.
And he doesn't just, stand up and vent his frustrations about King George III.
No, not at all.
He walked in and introduces a formal resolution that essentially functions as a timeline and a structural blueprint for the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, he introduces the very idea of putting the separation in writing and executing it structurally.
Which is wild.
It is a staggering leap. Keep in mind, up until this point, the Continental Congress had been managing a war, right? Lexington and Concord had already happened.
Right, but weren't they largely fighting for their rights as British subjects?
Yes, exactly. They were fighting for representation to fix the relationship. But Lee stands up and says, the relationship is over, and here's exactly how we are going to dismantle it.
I kept thinking of Richard Henry Lee as like the ultimate proactive project manager of a startup nation.
Oh, I like that.
But even that analogy feels a bit too safe, because a standard project manager actually has authority. Lee was just a delegate trying to convince his peers to willingly sign their own death warrant.
Right. If they failed, the punishment for treason wasn't a fine. It was the gallows.
The literal gallows. So how radical was it to not just say we should leave, but to actually demand it be put in writing like that?
The stakes could not have been higher. And that is exactly why his resolution had to be so meticulously structured. It wasn't just like a brief memo declaring they were leaving.
Right.
The Lee Resolution was constructed in 3 very distinct, highly calculated parts.
Okay, lay those out for us.
So the first part is the one that gets the most attention. It states, and I'm quoting here, resolved, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
That's a strong start.
Right. And it finishes with, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved.
Totally dissolved. It leaves absolutely no room for negotiation. He is severing the legal tie right there.
Absolutely.
But the brilliance of Lee is that he doesn't just stop with the breakup. He moves immediately into the mechanics of survival. Because the second part of his resolution demands that they take the most effectual measures for forming foreign alliances.
Which was an absolute geopolitical necessity.
Why? Just because of the British Army?
Well, think about it. The colonies had no professional army. They had no centralized bank. no manufacturing base for munitions, and critically, no navy.
Right, they're going up against the biggest navy in the world.
Exactly. If they are going to declare a permanent separation from the largest empire on the planet, they need money, weapons, and naval support. They needed France and Spain.
But wait, I have a question about that. Weren't the colonists fundamentally trying to break away from the tyranny of European monarchs?
Yeah, that was the whole point.
So why would his immediate next step be to tether this brand new, fragile experiment in liberty to the absolute monarchies of France or Spain? That feels like jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire.
It really does seem contradictory, but it highlights the extreme pragmatism of the era. The delegates understood the concept of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Okay.
France was still stinging from their losses to Britain in the 7 Years' War.
Yeah.
And Lee recognized that to legitimize this new nation, they had to be recognized by other global powers.
Because otherwise they're just a bunch of rebels.
Right. A rebellion is an internal squabble. But a war between sovereign nations requires diplomacy. He was forcing Congress to act like a sovereign nation on the world stage.
And that sets up his third point perfectly. Because if you are going to act like a sovereign nation abroad, you have to actually be one at home.
Exactly.
His third proposal demands that a plan of confederation be prepared and transmitted to the colonies, basically saying we need a way to unite these 13 completely distinct regions into one cohesive governing unit.
Yeah, and you have to remember how disconnected the colonies were back then.
They weren't really a unified group at all, right?
Not even close.
Yeah.
Massachusetts and South Carolina had completely different economies, different social structures, religious foundations, even different currencies.
Wow, different currencies.
Yeah, they operated almost like independent countries under the British umbrella. So if they cut the cord to London without weaving a new cord to bind themselves together, they would just be 13 isolated, vulnerable territories.
Just ripe for picking off one by one.
Exactly.
So Lee is laying out the entire architectural blueprint here. Declare freedom, find military allies, and build a new government structure. It's a brilliant three-part plan.
It really is.
But getting a room full of politicians from 13 different regions to actually vote on it is another story. I mean, the immediate pushback was severe, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The resolution was quickly labeled premature.
Premature. After Lexington and Concord.
Well, the resistance wasn't necessarily because the delegates loved King George. The resistance was entirely about political authority.
Okay, explain that.
The delegates in the Continental Congress were representatives. They were essentially ambassadors from their home colonies.
Right.
They were sent there with specific written instructions from their colonial legislatures. And in early June of 1776, many of those instructions explicitly forbade voting for independence.
Wait, really? They were forbidden?
Yes. They were essentially tied to the mandates of their constituents. So the delegates from the middle colonies, places like Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, they were saying, hold on, we don't have the legal authority to vote for this.
Oh, I see. Because if they do, they're acting as a rogue junta.
Exactly. They were saying, we have to send word back home and get permission to burn down the house before we actually light the match.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They agree the vote is premature. They formally hit the pause button on declaring independence to wait for these updated instructions.
Right, they paused the vote.
Yet, just 4 days later, on June 11, Congress goes ahead and appoints 3 separate committees to execute the 3 parts of Lee's resolution anyway.
Yeah, they just keep moving forward.
They form one committee to draft the declaration, one for foreign alliances, and one for a plan of confederation. Wait. They thought it was premature to vote on independence, but they still formed 3 committees to prepare for it.
It is an incredible moment of bureaucratic contingency planning.
Isn't that like buying a wedding ring before you've even gone on a first date? I mean, I have to challenge the logic of what they were doing here.
Sounds a little crazy, I know.
If they officially delayed the vote because they lacked the authority, why immediately start writing the documents? Isn't that like a rescue crew assembling all their gear, gassing up the helicopter, and plotting a flight path while they're still waiting for the distress signal to be officially confirmed?
That analogy actually captures the urgency perfectly. They were gassing up the helicopter because they knew the storm was already hitting.
The distress signal was coming no matter what.
Exactly. The delegates could read the writing on the wall. King George had already declared the colonies to be in a state of open rebellion. British troops were mobilizing.
So they knew independence was an inevitability.
Right. The only question was the timeline. If they waited until every single colony officially voted yes before they even started debating the text of a declaration or the terms of a treaty or the complexities of a constitution, they would be caught dangerously unprepared.
They needed the bureaucracy to catch up with the vision. Lee's resolution forced them to mix the concrete and lay the foundation while they were still arguing over whether they were legally allowed to build the house.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And so these committees began their grueling work behind closed doors. You've got Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and others all sequestered away, drafting these monumental documents.
Just grinding it out.
Yeah. They are building the architecture of the new nation based entirely on Lee's June 7 roadmap. And all throughout June, while they are writing, those horseback riders are slowly returning to Philadelphia with updated instructions from the colonies.
Because information moved at the speed of a galloping horse back then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Getting an update from hundreds of miles away meant weeks of delay.
Man, the tension must have been unbelievable. The rescue helicopter is fueled, the crew is sitting in their seats, and they're just waiting for that final radio call to take off.
And that call finally comes.
Yes, it does. The climax of this entire timeline happens on July 10th, 1776.
Right. The Continental Congress convenes and officially adopts the first part of Lee's resolution, the core Declaration of Independence. 12 of the 13 colonies vote yes to sever all ties with the British Crown.
July 2. This is the moment that completely rewrites the script of the holiday. The actual legal separation from Great Britain was authorized on July 2.
That was the true Independence Day.
But you mentioned 12 colonies voted yes. There were 13. Who was the holdout on the most important vote in American history?
Well, it was New York. The New York delegation abstained entirely from the July 2 vote.
Wait, why? Were they fundamentally opposed to leaving, or was it a procedural issue?
It was heavily procedural, but it was combined with a terrifying local reality. The New York delegates hadn't received their updated instructions from their home convention.
Because of the delay with the horses.
Part of it, yeah. But the real reason they hadn't received them is that New York was in a state of absolute chaos. A massive British naval fleet, commanded by General William Howe, was literally arriving in New York Harbor at that exact moment.
Oh, wow. Talk about bad timing.
Right. The New York Provincial Congress was fleeing the city to avoid capture. They were trying to manage an active war zone, which made it practically impossible to send a timely dispatch to Philadelphia.
So the New York delegates in Philly were completely paralyzed.
Exactly.
They couldn't vote yes without defying their outdated instructions, but they couldn't get new instructions because their government was on the run from the largest armada the British had ever assembled.
So they made the safest legal choice, which was just to abstain. It wasn't until a week later, on July 9, that the New York Convention, having relocated to safety, officially upheld the declaration.
Making the colonial split finally unanimous.
Exactly.
It's wild that the logistics of an 18th century war zone directly dictated the mechanics of the vote. But let's bring it back to Philadelphia. The vote happens on July 2. The Lee Resolution is adopted. The colonies are legally independent.
Yep, the deed is done.
So what on earth is July 4? Why do we have a massive national holiday on the 4th instead of the 2nd?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to the fundamental difference between a legislative action and a public document.
Okay, break that down.
July 2 was the day the Continental Congress took the action. They voted to dissolve the political connection. That was the legal lever being pulled.
Right.
July 4 was simply the day Congress formally adopted the physical document, the Declaration of Independence. That explained why they pulled the lever.
The document largely written by Thomas Jefferson, the one with the beautiful flowing script that sits in the National Archives today.
Yes. Jefferson's task on that first committee was essentially to draft a press release to the world.
A press release? That's a great way to think of it.
Yeah, I mean, Lee's resolution was the verdict. Jefferson's declaration was the legal brief explaining the justification for that verdict to the global court of public opinion.
Wow.
The text was debated and finalized over the next 2 days, and it was formally adopted on July 4.
It is wild to think that even the men in the room at the time thought July 2 was going to be the day recorded in the history books. I mean, John Adams was famously convinced of it.
Oh, John Adams was entirely certain. He wrote a letter to his wife, Abigail, on July 3, where he made a very bold prediction.
What did he say?
He stated that the second day of July, 1776, would be celebrated by succeeding generations as the most memorable epoch in the history of America.
He called it just for the wrong day.
He even envisioned a day of deliverance, celebrated with pomp, parades, shows, sports, bonfires and illuminations, which is our word for fireworks, from one end of the continent to the other forevermore.
That is unbelievable. John Adams, one of the most brilliant political minds of the era, the man who actually championed the vote on the floor, totally gets the date wrong for the biggest holiday in American history. He predicted the fireworks perfectly, but he was off by 48 hours.
It's funny, but it reveals how human history actually unfolds versus how it is experienced in the moment. The public didn't experience the closed-door vote on July 2.
Right, they weren't in that sweltering room.
Exactly. They experienced the document. The Declaration was printed as a broadside and read aloud in town squares. Jefferson's preamble, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," was just so eloquent and possessed such philosophical power that the document itself completely overshadowed the original mechanical act of legislation that made it possible.
So the public relations of independence completely consumed the act of independence.
Precisely.
The PR department got the national holiday, while the architect who engineered the structural blueprint was relegated to a footnote.
A footnote that deserves to be the headline, honestly. Because legally, the Lee Resolution is the resolution of independence.
Yeah.
And Lee's influence didn't just stop with the vote. The very text of his resolution is baked directly into the final paragraph of Jefferson's Declaration.
Wait, really? Jefferson used his words?
Literally copied them. Jefferson took Lee's words about being absolved from all allegiance to the British crown and put them into the culmination of his famous document.
Okay.
It is literally the DNA of the nation's founding.
That is so cool. Without Richard Henry Lee forcing the timeline, without him bringing that 3-part architectural blueprint into a room full of hesitant delegates, the events of early July 1776 would have looked entirely different.
Without a doubt.
He is a genuinely forgotten founding father. I mean, we celebrate Washington the general, Jefferson the writer, Adams the orator. But Richard Henry Lee was the strategist who slammed the roadmap on the table and forced the Continental Congress to build the infrastructure of a nation.
He was a true voice of calculated statecraft. He understood that declaring independence was meaningless if you didn't also have the alliances to defend it and the internal government to sustain it.
Right. So what does this all mean for us today? We've spent this time digging into the mechanics of committees, delayed instructions, and forgotten resolutions. We've moved past the mythology of the holiday to see how the sausage was actually made in 1776. Let's zoom out.
Well, the deeper takeaway here is highly philosophical, yet immediately practical. I mean, we enjoy the fruits of this independence every single day. But the history of the Lee Resolution reveals a crucial caveat. True independence and freedom require an immense amount of responsibility.
That is the element that stands out the most to me. Lee didn't just stand up and demand freedom from a tyrant. Complaining is easy,
Oh, very easy. Tearing down old system is easy.
But he meticulously prepared for the aftermath. By demanding foreign alliances and insisting on a complicated plan for confederation, he took total responsibility for the liberty he was demanding. He knew you couldn't just shatter the old world without having the blueprints for the new one ready to roll out.
And that defines sustainable independence. It is never a spontaneous, reckless event. To survive, freedom has to be carefully planned, rigorously debated, and methodically constructed.
Right.
Lee prepared the foundational structure of a new nation so that when the break happened, the country wouldn't collapse into anarchy. And the implication is that individuals must apply that same rigor to themselves. You have to carefully prepare your mind, your skills, and your ethics to uphold your own liberty.
Because freedom isn't just the absence of rules or the absence of a king. It is the heavy burden of self-governance.
Exactly.
Whether that is governing 13 fractured colonies in the face of a British armada, or simply governing your own life, your choices, and your future today, you have to actively build the architecture for your own liberty.
You have to be the architect of your own independence.
I love that. We started this deep dive thinking about summer barbecues and the mythology of July 4th. But we've uncovered how a single Virginia delegate named Richard Henry Lee didn't just wish for a nation's freedom, he carefully and methodically built the architecture to make it a reality on July 2.
He really did. He took the responsibility to plan for what came next.
So as you go about your day, as you navigate your own life, here's a final thought to mull over. What are the specific things you are doing right now to carefully prepare yourself for a life of true independence and responsibility?
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.